Today we're going to be talking about ways in which you can recognize accountability and ways in which you can develop accountability in your workplace. As you know, here at Bulletproof Talent, our mission is to restore sanity to the workplace. And we think a key way to do that is to really focus on what we believe is one of the 5 core competencies in doing so, and that is personal accountability. As we work with organizations that are working to focus on accountability, we find that many models fall short in that they only focus on ownership or responsibility or accepting responsibility, and really are short-sighted because they aren't, first of all, defined well enough and thoroughly enough for people to be able to really recognize and work at a level in this competency that you can really move the needle and drive things forward in your development processes. So hopefully today we'll give you some new ways of looking at accountability and some great strategies on how to develop it. As we go through this, just to let you know, the webinar is being recorded, so with everything working well, hopefully, we will be able to post this webinar not only to the Bulletproof site, but to send you a follow-up email so that those of you that maybe couldn't join us because of the reschedule can at least have the information and pass it along. When we are looking at the focus on employee value and in regards to accountability, we believe that when you focus just on performance, you fall short, because performance usually is the discussion you're having far after the fact, and that also is the case with discussions on accountability. Too many discussions take place after the results are already in, and you're always in a review mode. When we looked at how to truly drive value, and this value is based a great deal on accountability of the employee, we found that performance management isn't always the best way in which to drive for employee value. Value is what an employee contributes over time, not only what they give, but the total cost of what their contribution is to the organization. So at Bulletproof Talent, we believe that rather than looking at employee performance, we need to change our focus to look at employee value. And we have an employee value equation that we like to use that we believe really goes beyond performance. If you want to know an employee's value, don't just look at their performance metrics. You need to go beyond that. Value is not just performance, it's someone's performance plus their potential. Potential is what capacity they have. Are they learning and growing? What's their learning curve look like? Are they really assured to be performing far into the future? It's taking performance and rolling it out 5 years from now. It's thinking about, is this person who's performing today still going to have relevant skills in the future? Will they have kept up with their development? Are they zealous in growing and developing so that they are keeping up with the times and adding value going forward? Now, most talent assessments have gone beyond performance, and they've looked at performance and potential. Many of you are familiar with the 9-box grids that we use in talent assessments today, where we look at performance over the last few years, what that trend looks like, and we grid that against someone's potential for a future contribution to the organization. It's a great model we've all been using in both HR and leadership, and I personally went and took a look at those organizations with which I was doing talent development and really looked at whether those who we thought were the high potentials, high performers, really could add value to the bottom line, the key metrics, whether it was customer satisfaction, whether it was profitability, whether it was market share growth. And when we looked in organizations that wanted to really identify values employees added to those key metrics, we hoped there was a correlation for those of us in HR between an employee's performance and potential to value. What we found when you looked on the macro at the numbers is that there wasn't always a strong correlation. We were rating people as high performing, high potential, and many times had a great high percent of those folks in our workplace in the same very years that the value the organization was experiencing wasn't high, it wasn't outstanding, and there was at times a negative correlation between those two. So in order to really look at value, we believe you have to go beyond performance and potential, although those are important. And you have to do the other half of the equation, which is to figure out what that employee's contribution is truly costing the organization beyond salary and benefits, beyond monies dedicated to their development, beyond the time that we're working in and working to develop them. And that is a factor we call emotional expensiveness. Emotional expensiveness is what the employee takes from the organization. And as we looked at this, we found that it actually has a coefficient of 3 in our formula, in that emotional expensiveness affects other people. It affects our customers. It affects our brand. It affects groups and teams that we work with. And so when looking at employee value, a long disregarded factor has been emotional expensiveness. Now, we've talked about it in behind closed doors as we shared frustrations about employees, but I'm not sure we ever had a way to measure it or a name for it. So if you're going to be managing employee value, if you're going to be leading in ways that ensure that each person you have on your team is adding the highest value possible, you have responsibility to manage their performance. That is setting clear expectations and providing great feedback on how those expectations are being met. You also have a big responsibility to work with employees to ensure that they take ownership of their own development, that they are quickly adapting to new technologies, that they're zealot for learning and growing, they're taking advantage of all kinds of development opportunities such as new job assignments, challenges, networking, mentoring, continuing their education. And you really, as a leader, need to promote those development opportunities and to ensure that people are serious about staying current and prepared well into the future. As a leader, however, a majority of your attention needs to be paid to emotional expensiveness. It's 3 times the weight in our formula. So just to run you through some math on how we might look at value beyond performance is to simply take a performance score on a scale of 1 to 5, and let's say I have an employee whose performance score is a 3. I'll then look at their potential on a scale of 1 to 5, measuring them against zealot growth and development. And 1 is where they are not interested in additional training or opportunities. 3 is they do those things, but not without a bit of resistance, and they have a bit of difficulty keeping up with current technologies and current trends and initiatives. And a 5 is someone who is absolutely gung-ho, early adopter, willing to really look into the future, anticipate what's next, and incorporate that early and often into their daily work. So let's say this employee I have who is a consistently meets expectation performer, their performance rating's a 3. I rate them in their potential as a 3. They're willing to continue to work to learn new ways of doing things and to adopt technology as it comes into the business. They aren't out pursuing those things on their own, but they're a 3 in that area. That gives them a 6 so far in the employee value formula. Now let's take a look at that employee's emotional expensiveness. This scale is now inversed on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 being that they're very low maintenance, 3 being that they are pretty emotionally mastered. They have kind of control of their own emotions, and they are assertive, work well with others. They fall off the bus maybe once every quarter. You've got to give them lots of love and reward and recognition to kind of build them back up. That's a 3. A 5 is someone, you could basically say is unfit for human consumption. They just are difficult to work with. They maybe hoard information, or they pass the buck and blame others, or they are drama kings and queens. Basically, when you see their car in the parking lot in the morning, when you thought you're going to have a nice quiet extra hour early in the morning at work, and you see their car in the parking lot, you're a bit bummed. you're thinking, ugh, I don't want to deal with that again. So let's say the employee I'm referring to actually is pretty low maintenance. They may be a 2 in regards to their emotional expensiveness. If you do the math with me, you'll see an average performer with average potential that has even a 2 in emotional expensiveness, 3 plus 3, and you have to subtract 3 times 2, which is 6. You'll find their employee value is 0. Doesn't necessarily mean a negative. It just means that you basically are getting what you pay for. They give you average performance and potential. They are low cost to the organization. It's a pretty fair transaction. And, basically when it comes to value, this employee adds value today and will continue to do so in the future. Now, many of the people you might put through this formula could be top performers with top potential, but if their emotional expensiveness is even moderate, you can see how quickly your employees might move into the negative number when it comes to value. So let's say I have a top performer. Let's give them a 4 out of 5. They are very cutting edge. Let's give them even a 5 in their potential, which is why we continue to keep them around, as we think that they are great technically, they have lots of potential, but perhaps they're a 4 in their emotional expensiveness. It ends up, if you do the math, that they're actually a -3, that no matter how much you try and convince me that their technical proficiency and their great potential is good for the organization, we know differently. We know that they take more value than they add. And at Bulletproof Talent, we are calling for people to restore sanity to the workplace by really looking at absolute value that employees add, the absolute value that they bring to the table. Far too long, we've overrated performance, sometimes potential, with hope being our strategy, and we've underrated emotional expensiveness. And what we're finding in today's new reality, that most of our customers or those payers who are buying our services are interested in value. They're interested in something bigger than did they just get what they asked for. That's why so many of us are looking to invest in our brands. We're investing in relationships. We're investing in loyalty. We're investing in proving that we deliver transformational outcomes and not just transactional services. If your business is moving into a strategy of transformation and value orientation, then your talent strategy needs to move away from transactions and pay for performance into one that truly looks at employee value. And what we're finding are some surprising things, that in today's new reality, those average utility players that are willing to do anything at any time, any part, the ones who simply say yes most often, those folks are actually adding more value based on what we need today than many of our highly technical folks. And that's why outsourcing on some of the technical issues are seen as such a threat by those individuals, is because they know they've been highly emotionally expensive. They've been protected by either their knowledge, expertise, or technical performance, and the world for them is changing dramatically. It is changing in such a way that they know that their numbers will no longer protect them. I find this especially relevant in many IT fields. So some of you on the line that focus in the IT field might recognize this. So when we are looking at how to identify and develop for accountability, the reason that accountability is so important is because emotional expensiveness is such an important factor in the employee value equation. It is vital for us as leaders and managers to diminish and decrease this part of the equation. If you want to know what makes someone emotionally inexpensive, there are 5 competencies we have found that are shared by those folks that are emotionally inexpensive, and the main core competency is personal accountability. The other 4 are things like reality-based thinking, their ability to drive for results, their ability not just to not panic or get upset when change happens, but to actually anticipate and capitalize on change, and their ability to willingly align with the organization. But as you can see from the slide in front of you, we believe the center force of all of this is personal accountability. So if you want people to be emotionally inexpensive, they need to be fluent in these 5 competencies. And you can then see the relationship between personal accountability, and if someone's fluent in that competency, if you've identified those folks that have personal accountability and you've developed those people that you're working with for personal accountability, you'll see, going back to the equation, it can have a huge impact on their value. So let's talk about personal accountability today. First of all, how you identify it. Personal accountability is a mindset that results happen because of one's own actions, not in spite of them. It's the opposite of what we call learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is when people come to believe they have no impact over the results. They actually believe their results were inhibited by factors outside their control. They actually believe it isn't about their own choices, but it's about what other people have done or other circumstances beyond their control. That's learned helplessness. We know that personal accountability is a mindset that things happen because of them. It's that people choose their own destiny. Bottom line, there is a victim mindset, which believes I'm at the mercy of all of this, and there is an accountable mindset that believes even when reality has some risks and some challenges, I have a ton of choices and responses that can either mitigate those risks or expand upon those risks. In personal accountability, many definitions, many of the authors that I have read have done a good job describing personal accountability, but where I believe we've been able to get some breakthrough, additional understanding of accountability is by breaking it out into its core factors. Many folks talk about accountability in general, and when they talk to you about how to instill accountability in your workplace, they talk a lot about responsibility or ownership. For years, I could tell when someone was accountable. I could tell the difference between someone who wasn't accountable and someone who was, but I didn't necessarily have a way to diagnose how accountability was not being lived out at the individual level, and I didn't necessarily have a way to break it down so that I could put it into words and coach for it. So I'm thrilled to say that Jason Lawrenson and myself have worked hard on really looking at what makes up accountability. We know that there are 4 factors. Accountability doesn't start after the results are in with whose butt is on the line, who's willing to take ownership of these results. Accountability starts way, way before that with a factor we call commitment. Commitment is a willingness to do whatever it takes to get the results, and many, many leaders don't ask for commitment. They assume commitment, they assume willingness, or they even ignore at times unwillingness and use hope as their strategy as they set expectations, assign projects, ask for deliverables. So the first step for leaders is what I call closing the deal. When we are setting people up for great accountability and hardwiring that into our workforce, we need to really focus on ensuring that people are giving us informed consent, that they're willing. Once people are willing, they have the best intentions, they can be off-put by seemingly small barriers or sometimes large barriers. Once someone is committed and willing, we need to then help them develop in resilience, which is when they are faced with an obstacle that they can stay the course. This involves some great problem-solving skills, it involves some creative thinking, some innovation, and it involves a lot of calling upon other resources and asking for help. The third factor is to really help people understand, as results come in, what their own piece in that was, to help them account for how they got the results at hand so that they can begin to sort out what they were truly at the mercy of circumstances for and what they truly could have had impact in. This sorting, this ability to own your own results regardless of whether they're positive or negative, is so important, because if I can't do a great job of really accounting for how I got my results, I don't have the ability to respond differently in the future. If I can't account for how I got my results, I can't then figure out what development needs I have, what I can grow and develop, and how I can change so that I can ensure that my results in the future will be better, that I have a high confidence level. It's through that process of ownership that then the fourth factor comes into play, which is if I can name it, I can identify it, I can see my part in it, I have this ultimate freedom, this ultimate ability to then use any failure I have and turn it into learning, which then sets me up for future success. Once I have the ownership and I am knowing what my next development need is, I am in the learning process, it starts over again. It's actually not linear. It's kind of a big circle, because then as a leader, I can get someone to commit first to development in whatever area it is that would increase their results in the future, and then commitment to use that learning to deliver future results. There are many times that people might embark on the learning, but we don't see it enter back into employee value because they aren't committing that learning into future results. So let's look at these individually a bit more detailed. The first step in accountability is helping people really have commitment. And many folks limit their own level of commitment. They have conditions on their level of commitment. I'm willing if you give me all the information. I'm willing if priorities don't change. I'm willing if I have all the tools to do my work and no one interferes with it and it's not outside my job description. And so one part of really helping to both identify accountability is to be able to hold someone up and measure them at this factor level. What generally is their commitment level look like? Is it with high conditions? Is it something that comes easy? Do people easily jump in, buy in? Do they give that as a gift, or is that something you need to purchase from them and bargain with them for? What's their general state of willingness? So as you look towards measuring someone's personal accountability, ask yourself, is this person generally willing to do whatever it takes to get the results? Do they sign up easily, or are they incredibly conditional? Because in your coaching then, you want to work on some of those conditions. I hear at times people say things like, well, that's not my job. And my response to that always is, you know, your job description is my best guess at how you might spend some of your time while employed with us. Your role is to do whatever it takes within your licensure, within your expertise, within your authority to achieve our goals, whether that is thrilling the customer or if that is, you know, fulfilling shipment, whatever that might be. And this is a key concept that you need to preach and teach in large groups. You need to preach and teach in the individual sessions. So if you're working on accountability, this is the first step for you to really start to focus on reshaping the mindsets of your workforce, that they understand that commitment is something they give, commitment is something that is expected, it's something that is part of their role. When somebody willingly joins up and aligns with the organization and buys in easily, it really takes drama out of the organization. It takes all of that resistance, which usually comes in the form of, here's my opinion, my expertise, why it won't work, and it puts resistance into reality, which is really just unwillingness or incapability. When people tell you that won't work, what they're really saying when it comes to accountability, that is a sophisticated way to pretend to be accountable while saving the organization with my opinion, this won't work because. And what it really is about is lack of accountability. When someone says it won't work and they haven't tried it, they don't have good data, what it is not feedback. Many times it is resistance. And that is really a statement of the fact that I'm either incapable of performing at that level or unwilling. So you want to look for somebody that willingly joins up. As you're coaching and developing for this factor, coach for risk-taking. Someone who has commitment and is willing really leans forward in the foxhole. They are not playing defense. They are playing offense. They are not worried about all the what-ifs. They are confident that as the what-ifs come, and we'll get into the next factor of resilience, that as those what-ifs come, that they are really good at risk mitigating and that they can move through those what-ifs with really good decision-making. So in order to work on commitment, just make sure that expectations are clear, and what I call is that the consent is informed. So when you're working with employees, with other even team members, with colleagues, even with your bosses, as you are outlining work and setting expectations, I want to make sure you close the deal. Instead of just saying, get it, got it, good, let's move on, using hope as your strategy, to really say things like, can I count on you? So what are you committing to? And there'll be a video coming out that helps with some of these techniques as well in closing the deal that you'll be receiving as part of a follow-up to our webinars. But really asking people, can I count on you, and what is your commitment? What are you exactly committing to? Once you have people who are willing, that are committed, the next place that you need to work with them in is resilience, and that's the ability to really keep moving forward to overcome obstacles in the face of setbacks. Resilience is something that absolutely can be developed. It's also something, as you're working to identify personal accountability, that you can even test in the interview process. You can test someone's resilience by simply making a quick change to their interview location prior to their interview and see how they handle that setback in a high-risk situation when they're wanting to make a good impression. It can be as simple as changing it one floor down or just giving them a bit of a challenge. It can be during the interview process that you change out interviewers in the middle of that process and just see how they handle some setbacks. It's very important to not coddle employees if you want to develop resilience, because the more you try and make sure their world is perfect, the less developed they are in resilience. And so one of the reasons I believe that personal accountability is waning in the workforce is that we have worked hard to try not to challenge our people because they've emotionally blackmailed us at times that these jobs are too big, it's already too crazy, and they've stepped down in resilience hoping for us to perfect their circumstances. And resilience is really a key part of being what we call bulletproof, able to deliver in spite of your circumstances. So work with people on problem solving. When people come to me and they say something like, I was willing and I tried, but here's what happened, I left a message, they didn't call back. A great way to coach for resilience is to ask them, what are 10 additional things they could have tried that would have impacted the outcome, and really get brainstorming around what else they could have done, what resources are at hand, why it's not okay just to stop after the first, second, or third attempt, to really help them understand that your expectations are that there's many, many attempts when delivering on a project or an assignment. Making sure that people are persevering. Another great coaching technique I've used to help people with resilience is to have someone who isn't delivering in this area paired up with someone who is. And whenever the person is stuck, the one who tends to stop in the face of challenges, I have a hotline for them. They basically call their resilience mentor and ask them what they would do in this situation. And then we talk about that on a weekly basis. So there's just a lot of ways that you can focus on helping somebody in the second factor of resilience. The third factor is ownership, and this really means that people do not blame others or their circumstances, that they understand that their results are because of their own behavior, their own resilience, their own commitment levels, and that their happiness isn't related to circumstances, it's related to accountability. When people exhibit ownership, they readily account for their own impact on their own results, good or bad. So instead of saying, I was late, the traffic was crappy, I'm sorry, it is, I didn't plan enough time for traffic, and here's the adjustment I intend to make. That second part is what exhibits our next factor of continuous learning. I had a gentleman interview with me once, and he just blew me away. I asked him about a gap in his job history, and he said, oh, well, to be very honest, I was fired. And I was a little shocked by his honesty. I said, okay, you were fired, but was it for cause? He said, absolutely. He said, okay. And I said, what happened? And I was waiting to hear the victim's story, all about how crazy his boss was and how unfair it was and how discriminated he was against him, and it didn't come. He simply said, I went over my boss's head on an issue that I didn't agree with her on. I did not give her the opportunity to work it out individually with me. I even ignored a couple of requests from her to speak individually. I chose a strategy that I thought would promote me and basically demote her, and I was fired for insubordination. I was shocked. When people talk in terms of ownership, their stories are short. They don't have a lot of color or drama. They are simply statements of the facts, and they have a ton of eyes in their descriptions. If you are working with, interviewing, or coaching someone whose stories are long, they're complex, they go through multiple details, and the gist of the conversation is they did this to me, you know that ownership is your main issue. This is an individual with high ownership that has a healthy sense of guilt. Now, the reason I loved this particular candidate is not that he was insubordinate or admitted to it. It was that he went on to say, and what I learned from that experience is that I'm a pretty passive-aggressive person. I have really dug deep and worked on how to be more assertive, how to be more upfront, and that led right into continuous learning, which is this perspective that these successes or failures are really learning experiences that can be really made into future successes. He went on in this interview to say, and here's why you want me to work for you, is that when your team is planning some sort of coup, or they really believe that you are the issue or unapproachable, or that they should go around you, and they've made up a story why they have to, I really believe I can be a great influence to give them a lot of other options and to encourage them to directly communicate with you. And he said, I know that's what my plan would be. What was great about this candidate is not that he had never screwed up. It's that he had absolutely gotten clear about what his failure was about and what his piece in it was. And he didn't even ever tell me what any of the conditions were or what his boss was like or what her part in it was. He simply stuck with his own part and had done the work of continuous learning where he knew exactly what he was going to do different in the future in order to get better results. This is so important on a team, this continuous learning factor, because today's accountability is a true predictor of tomorrow's results. The level of accountability in your team today, if we were to measure their willingness and we were to measure their resilience and we were to measure their ownership and their level of continuous learning, that measurement is a very accurate predictor of future results, because at the end of the day, you get two things. You get either results or learning, and learning is just future results if connected back into the first factor, which is willingness, and accountability starts over again. I have lots of organizations that when they don't get results, they get learning and translate that into results again very quickly, that they seem as though they are above the law a bit. I mean the law of nature. During the recession, I had a couple of companies who tripled their growth. During down times and during other times where people are laying off, they were actually adding to. Turnover, for other folks who want to limit it, they actually increase their turnover in order to get better results. They seem to be working against the laws of nature, and what I would tell you is it's because they were turning their lack of results today into current learning, which is future results into the future. Many, many other companies are not getting results today, and because they aren't focused on accountability, are not turning that lack of results into learning or translating that into future results. So when someone's into continuous learning, their challenges and failures are seen as just opportunities for growth. They don't believe that accountability is about just saying, I'm sorry. They believe that it goes beyond saying I'm sorry to making amends and restoring and ensuring things don't happen into the future. They're folks that can converse easily about what they're learning and what their development needs are. And it's so important that, that leaders are truly involved in continuous learning, and here's why. Right now, a way we kill accountability is we let people believe that their lack of results has something to do with something outside of them. And secondly, when we're coaching, we are coming up with all the ways in which people need to develop. We are basically writing their development plans. But if you can have ownership, understand what your part is, and the continuous learning happens at the individual level, they're setting their own development plan. They're owning their own development. They're identifying with why it would be important to learn that particular skill. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. How do we develop people in accountability? We've talked about the 4 factors. Hopefully, instead of just talking in general about accountability or over-focusing on ownership, when you know there's 4 factors involved in accountability, you can start to see where people need you to help them hone in on and master the skills of each of those factors. And by the way, they are in order. It all starts with commitment, and resilience is that second step. Once you can help people really hone in on what part of accountability they're stepping down in, you can help develop them through a cycle that we really believe is important. When we look at how to develop personal accountability, we know that it is a process, and that process begins with challenge. I'm talking about giving people not just growth experiences, but keeping them rightly challenged. If they could process 30, move it to 35. If they are capable of, working through projects in 3 weeks, see what you can do to get them more capable of working through projects in 2.5 weeks. Personal accountability is developed through challenging assignments. One of the reasons we're seeing a drop in personal accountability in the workplace, I believe, is not that we're over-challenging people. I think that we're under-challenging people, for one thing. Many of us have become convinced by our employees that these jobs are too big. Most leaders I talk to tell me they are delegating less and less and less, that they are working not to overwhelm their people or to give them any type of increasing challenge. They're just hoping that their people get through the day as it is today. And this is a key problem because personal accountability is developed through challenge. Many of these folks are being over-rewarded and under-coached. You have to challenge people But this is a supported process. So the first step in developing accountability is to challenge people to step outside of their interpretation that the world is to blame. Challenge people to change mindsets, to step up and accept accountability rather than stepping down and creating a story about why they had to. Challenge people to get away from wanting their circumstances perfected and challenge them to get more bulletproof. Many people are in pain today in the workplace, not because they're over-challenged, but because they're underdeveloped. They have not kept up with the development curve. They have fallen behind and gotten complacent, and so the task at hand seems very big to them, when to other folks the task at hand is doable because they have kept up with their development process. So first way to develop it is to challenge somebody. And then those folks need to experience accountability. We need to quit protecting folks from some of their natural consequences, some of their experiences. We need to follow that with giving great, clear feedback. And this is honest feedback. Here's what's working well. Here's what you could work on to develop in next. Here's what's possible type of feedback. But the most important thing, I believe, the most important part of this in developing personal accountability is allowing people time for self-reflection. We are doing way too much of the development process for others, and it's because we have an aversion to seeing anyone in pain. If you think about a time that really was life-changing for you, it probably entailed you being left to your own stuff, you getting some feedback, and then you giving some time to really just work your way through all the anger, all the bargaining, all the defensiveness on your own until you could find kind of what the truth in it was for you. We tend to take way too long in our coaching. We tend to do most of the talking rather than asking questions and allowing for self-reflection. And another video coaching tip coming your way will be on some of those questions for self-reflection. And then lastly, another step that we have lost track of is what I call sense-making mentoring. This is having people in place who aren't the boss, safe places for people to go that don't sympathize with the individual, they empathize with the individual, then call that individual up to greatness for a second time. And here's what I mean by that. It used to be, or our hope is that it will be today, that HR is that person, that employee relations was part of sense-making mentoring. If I were a boss, I would talk to my employee and give him some feedback. The employee leaves my office frustrated with me as their boss, convinced I set them up to fail, convinced I'm not helpful to them. When they go to another individual who's a sense-making mentor, the worst thing that mentor can do is to say, I know, it doesn't sound fair. I do think you're great. This is fabulous. Is to say, you know, I've now known you for a couple of years, and it seems like this is a theme for you. When you worked for Ralph, it was all Ralph. When you worked for Sue, it was all Sue. And now you're working for Cy. This seems bigger than the situation. This seems like there's a life lesson in here for you. It's someone who says that, you know, these lessons keep getting put in front of you until you really step up and through them. It's someone who doesn't collude with you to let you off the hook, but someone who really says, what's your piece in this, and what can you do to step up and impact this? Why is this happening for your highest good? What is your key lesson here? And those sense-making mentors are so important to the process. So just to review quickly, when you think about this process and how to develop accountability, challenges don't need to be new roles. They can be within the current role. What are some projects you can put people on? What are some changes in tasks? How can you make their development plans truly hefty? What can you do either for knowledge transfer, cross-training, lateral job movements? And remember that delegation is really a key. Delegate with an eye towards development. When I go through what I need off my plate, what other people need to become fluent in, I look to match up the people who I'm going to delegate to, not always the ones who already know how to do it, and just putting more on their plate. Usually what happens is the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. And what I mean by that is we fire people and don't tell them. We take on their work for a while. Then we need to delegate it off to somebody. We delegate it off to people who already know how to do that, and that is just dumping. Delegation with an eye towards development is finding someone who could grow next in the very area that you want to delegate, and making that a good challenge for them, but supporting them with all the things we've talked about, like feedback and mentoring. So the first step is challenge. The second step is to make sure that people experience accountability, that you have a consistent focus on how one's performing against the challenge, that you've got measurement in place, and that you're not protecting people from their reality. If there's a gap, you need to let them know the gap. I often hear people interpreting results very differently. Leaders who are frustrated with results and employees who say, I think we did pretty good considering the circumstances. The leader is saying, regardless of the circumstances we need to deliver, and this wasn't pretty good, this was below standard. So you really need to deliver reality to your folks. Encourage them and thank them for where they did step up, but really make sure that you're clear with them about where they're not meeting the mark. This is the only way to make your recognition really stick, because when you tell people they're doing great, if they can't trust that you'd be telling them where they aren't doing as well, then you're telling them things are great is not believable, and it's not seen as valuable recognition. That's why so many times people deny having been recognized in the last 7 days. When leaders believe they have, it doesn't stick in the minds of the employees because it's not very valid feedback. Make sure that people's choices and consequences remain visible. Shine the spotlight on them. Do some public declarations. Get them to commit openly so that other people are watching for it. If I have a secret goal of getting my master's, I can fail at it with no natural consequences. But if I'm asked to share that with everybody with milestones and time frames, and I'm asked every day in the hallway how my master's is going, I have more incentive to really step up and be accountable for it. And this sounds a little counter. Make these successes and failures a bit more public experience to create moments of truth. I've worked with many folks that they are preparing maybe a presentation for a board for their boss. The presentation falls short, comes in at the last minute. The boss goes in, does the best they can with a crappy presentation, takes the hit from the board, and the person who prepared the slides never experienced accountability. If there's any place that you can find opportunity for the people doing the work to actually deliver the work, it is an amazing process. I was able with one employee to say, you know what, I need you to make this presentation. And she would kind of panic and chicken out and ask to be removed from it. And not to set her up for failure, I worked through a couple of delays with her and did what I could to keep pushing her forward. And finally, I just had to say, we're not changing it. April 10th is the date. It was a low-risk situation in my mind because I knew that I had informed the folks this was a development role for her. It was an internal to the organization process. It was a pilot. But for her, it was a high-risk situation because she was in front of 40 people unprepared. It was the best learning she ever had because she got to experience what it's like when you aren't investing the time in preparation, and she is dead set on not letting that happen again. So she's got another presentation coming up. Hopefully, we'll see that this experience and accountability was helpful to her. Give people great feedback. Make sure you hold up that mirror, what's going well and what to work on next. But most importantly, get people feedback from multiple sources. It is easy to discount one source of feedback. It is difficult to discount feedback that you get from the market, that you get from potential customers or true customers, from patients, from your peers. So wherever you can, broaden your feedback to be available to the individual from multiple sources. Remove protection and allow failure at times, and let people learn from their natural consequences. There are many, many times that we protect people from our natural consequences. People believe that holding others accountable is somehow disciplining them or somehow doing something to them. And I often get asked the question, but Cy, I don't manage that person. How can I hold them accountable? And I say, don't focus on what you can do to them. Focus on places you enable them and remove your protection and allow some natural consequences. I had a physician I worked with that refused to be compliant with an initiative that involved his nurse calling patients preemptively to make sure that they were in the clinic at their regularly scheduled times for their particular condition. The physician basically told his nurse, they aren't the boss of us, you don't have to do that, we've got plenty of other stuff to work on. Well, I didn't have power over the physician, but I did have reporting responsibility for that initiative. So as I was about to go before a physician executive council and report on compliance level with the initiative, the doctor was very keen to get a meeting with me before I went in. I didn't do that. I went in and just presented the results in a very neutral database manner. Afterwards, he asked me, he said, well, where was I on the list? And I said, you were last. And he said, but you told them I have the highest number of patients in the clinic, right? And I said, no, actually I didn't, because we were just talking about compliance with this initiative. He said, but you told them my patients are the most chronic and that I serve on the most committees, and that what he wanted me to do is what I had done in the past, which is when I put up low scores for him, I felt obliged to explain and make excuses for all the reasons he might be in the lower quartile, when in fact the way for me to remove the natural consequences is to say all of these physicians have similar circumstances. These are the ones that perform, and these are the ones that don't. Right now, that transparency in healthcare has got people very concerned, because that's the ultimate accountability, is to have people able to see numbers, because people want to say, but my numbers don't take into account that I do X, Y, and Z, or my circumstances. And what I tell folks is you need to figure out how to get great numbers in spite of your circumstances, and then you won't fear some of this transparency. When it comes to self-reflection, let your people do the heavy lifting. Keep coaching time short. Allow time for reflection. Ask great questions. And then call the session to a close and give them time to give it some thought. Give them an assignment to report back. Focus on questions that really reveal their part in it. You know, what happened? What was your response? How did that work for you? What did you do to help? What was true? What do we know for sure? So you get them out of the drama. What do you need to do next that would add value? Those types of questions. And it's okay to allow a bit of pain and discomfort, because that's a great fuel for self-reflection. And lastly, I've talked quite a bit about sense-making mentoring, but also try and connect your people with someone that they can process off your clock with. It helps them to reinforce this accountable message, and it helps to raise trends and really ensures that people can't avoid their lesson by what I call geographical escapes. So if I am a sense-making, I have a mentor for me, and she knows that I can't just come to different people concerned about my work with different clients. I come only to her so that she can point out that this isn't about the different clients. This is about a development need I have in the ways in which I could scope work with clients differently. You also want to make sure that the sense-making mentors are living highly accountable lives. And this was an eye-opener to me. 2 weeks ago, I did a mini survey, just a verbal survey, to test for the level of accountability in an employee relations office in the HR group, and their accountability was incredibly low. And the leaders had told me they were frustrated because when people came to the employee relations, they didn't feel supported. And when I think about us using employee relations groups as sense-making mentoring, those HR folks, those other leaders have to be working their own kind of program of accountability. So I want to end with just 2 ideas on how to coach for accountability. The first one is to listen for really stupid questions. like why doesn't anyone tell me anything? Why does God hate me? Why do they keep changing priorities? When will they finally get it? When you hear people in that victim mindset asking these kind of rhetorical questions about why am I the victim, it is so important to teach people to ask better questions. Help them get questions that look different, that start with what or how. Help them turn questions of why doesn't anyone tell me anything into what can I do to get the information I need. Why do things keep changing into what can I do to support the change? How can I help? The question I want you focusing your people on is not why does this stuff keep happening. That's great process improvement fodder. But in the emotional moment, it's not about why this stuff is happening. It's about what can I do next that would add value. It takes people out of the past and into the future. Accountability is what can I do next. It is not, let me tell you a story about what went before. Another great tool that you'll hear about in our coaching tips as well, it's also in the book and in blogs on realitybasedleadership.com. It's called Leading for Accountability. It's accounting for exercise. Basically, what you're asking people to do is to account for how they got the results that they achieved. So first of all, you've got to be very clear about what you expect. So let's say I expect that a project's delivered on time, on budget. Well, let's say that project comes in 2 weeks late, a bit over budget. When I ask people how they think they did, many people will say, considering the circumstances, pretty darn good. It's a leader's job to ground people in reality that we didn't commit based on these conditions. We committed to deliver. And so there is a gap in what we committed and what we delivered. It's not a raving success. Be honest about the team's results. And then lead them through an accounting of their contributions to the results. This isn't an accounting of how their circumstances impacted their results, because that's where most people start. They start by telling you, well, President's Day was in there, and so we lost a day, a holiday. You need to take them back through and say, as I prepared the schedule, I did not account for President's Day. Because once they can turn around what they believe is their circumstances into language of I did, I didn't, I chose, they can then be very clear about what they can do differently in the future. In the future, I need to cross-check schedules against holiday and big orders that might be slated for that time so that I can give accurate estimates to the people depending on my results. Or once I learned of President's Day, I didn't take action to mitigate by insisting that people added a couple extra hours throughout the rest of the week to their work day to ensure that we delivered on time. It's an accounting for exercise. That concludes today's conversation about how to identify accountability. It's bigger than just ownership. It starts with commitment. It's all about resilience. Ownership is so important so that people can truly understand what is their piece, and continuous learning is so important to turn that learning into results. So as you look as in your hiring and in your coaching opportunities, really get those 4 factors out and look at that whole spectrum as you're working to help your employees develop an accountability. And then as you set up the work of getting them to develop, remember that calling people to greatness and challenging folks is the first step in really developing accountability. So call them up, work with them on getting the tools, work with them on developing that resilience, stretching those muscles bit by bit, and I think you'll be excited what increased levels of accountability do in your workplace. One, it restores sanity. We know that to be absolutely true. And secondly, today's accountability is an absolute predictor for tomorrow's results. So by working today, you are definitely ensuring on results for tomorrow. For more great information, get out to Bulletproof Talent. Make sure you're signed up for that newsletter. That's how we inform you of these webinars. And if you have any needs at all, please contact us. Cy or Jason at bulletprooftalent.com. Have a great day. Thanks.